Bubble Boys are back, or should I call us the Glasses Gang, because we got the whole trio of us got our spectacles on, and different shades of facial hair all the way around. It's actually in order. I got the full, I don't know if you can call this a beard or a stubble. I don't know what Preco's rocking there. And
I got some stubble going on.
But you know who else just came out the womb, at least in terms of college basketball? That's Peat, and that was a big baby that came out. And Arizona came out pretty rough and tough on Florida. That was not a result I was necessarily expecting. These guys touched on it Monday, but now that we've got me in the conversation, boy, that game was so entertaining. I don't know about y'all. That was one heck of an opener to this season.
Oh yeah, I think we touched upon it. It was so impressive. Just the physicality standpoint was super impressive from Peat.
Yeah, and we can talk all day about Peat in Arizona, but I think the focus for me is kind of where Florida didn't have it for me. I mean, it is very, very hard these are the defending national champions, and it is very hard to replace their two, maybe three best players in Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin and Will Richard. But when you're bringing back both members of your front court in Thomas Haug and Alex Condon and Micah Hanlockton off the bench, I expected a lot more of a paint presence out of Florida, and especially against a kind of run-and-gun team like Arizona. And while Thomas Haug was scoring, he was not rebounding whatsoever, and I think that's a major, major concern for the Gators.
Right, I agree. I think we touched upon it, Preco and I, on Monday. I think Preco made a good point on Monday. He was like, because we talked about Florida replacing their backcourt with, they brought in Xavier Lee, Boogie Flan, but then you lose, like you said, Walter Clayton, Will Richard, Elijah Martin. Like Preco said, those guys are just like physically big, and compare it to like Boogie Flan, Xavier Lee, they're not the biggest guys. So like from a physical
Elijah
standpoint,
Martin himself, that dude is he was a tank. Like I was,
right.
You would generally be scared of that guy coming down the lane, and Clayton was just a killer. Like you gave him the ball, and bad things were about to happen. And I mean, like I said, it is hard to fill into those shoes that they had. But Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan, I mean, if you're only going to run an 8-man rotation, if you're Todd Golden, I mean, they simply have to be better. They combined shot 8 of 26 and 3 of 13 from 3. They left a bunch of points out on the floor, and that's something you can't do against Arizona with the amount of extra possessions they give themselves and how they run up and down the court.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not overly concerned about Florida, especially, Xavier Lee is making that jump from the Ivy League to, Arizona's not an SEC team. This isn't SEC play yet, but that's obviously a high major, extremely physical caliber team. And so there is going to be an adjustment there. And I thought he did all right from that standpoint. Boogie Flan was a little bit more concerning for me, just in that game. But yeah, the biggest thing, and I won't dive too deep into it because I talked about it in the last episode, was Flan and Lee are both high caliber players, and they've showed it at the college level, but they're very different in terms of what they bring to the table from those guys that Anthony just mentioned, even in terms of physicality, touched on, yes, but just the pure athleticism. Walter Clayton was, known for, of course, being a killer and being a very strong outside shooter, but he also had the quickness to really beat guys off the dribble. But then, we saw him go to the rim and dunk on dudes sometimes too. Like he just had that next level athleticism. And then you look at Xavier Lee, who is 6'4", like 180, and so I don't know how tough they're going to be on the perimeter, and that's kind of what I'm keeping an eye on. There's a lot of skill there, but is it going to be enough to hang with the big boys this year?
For sure. And for me, I think it's Florida with that backcourt last year. It was the best backcourt in the country. They never faced a 1-2 tandem that was better than Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin. And not only were they not the best 1-2 on the floor, this kind of transitions into the Arizona part of things for me. Everyone loves what they saw from Peat. Personally, Jaden Bradley, I was thoroughly impressed with how that kid played against Florida. He has been really kind of a steady player for Tommy Lloyd over the years. Nothing too special. I mean, the keys have been given to him now without Caleb Love there and without Kerr Kriisa, curse his name. But 36 minutes, 9 of 14 from the floor. That's 27 points, 3 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals. Dude was doing everything out there. And this is the kind of, this the 27 points might not be sustainable, but this is the kind of production night in and night out that Arizona could not get from Caleb Love. And that is what has held back the Wildcats the last 2 years, because you didn't know what you were getting out of them night to night. I think Jaden Bradley is the kind of player who is reliable, who's going to bring, you know what you're going to get out of him every night. And when you have a talent like Koa Peat and Braden Burries, I think Arizona is set up really, really well for the rest of this season, just based off of one performance.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Arizona looks dominant, and what I was talking about with Anthony was we knew Koa Peat was going to be good. But even if you talk to scouts, you look at, what scouts at 247 Sports were saying going into it, like they said he might need some time to develop. His outside game wasn't particularly strong. He never showed he could consistently knock down a jump shot, score from the outside. Now we see against Florida, defending national champs, toughest competition he's going to face all year, he was able to get it done, and he didn't need to work from the outside. He got into his spots in the post. He was physical. He scored efficiently in the lane against maybe the best front court in the country. So that just unlocks a whole another dimension for them that I was expecting Koa Peat to be good. I wasn't expecting him to, now I wouldn't be surprised if he's their leading scorer this year. Now he's probably the best pick to be their leading scorer this year. I didn't, I could have been underestimating him going into this year, and that, could definitely be on me. But that's just, what really unlocks them for me. And then, of course, Jaden Bradley, Tommy Lloyd in that post-game TNT interview afterwards, he, straight up said that Jaden Bradley isn't getting the national attention he deserves, and he, showed why he deserves it with that performance against Florida. And I'll be curious to see, like you said, if he can become consistently like that. The one thing Caleb Love could never do was be consistent.
Yeah, and 100%. And what I know, Jaden Bradley was the focal point of Arizona to me, but everyone else is looking at the performance of Koa Peat. And I mean, I had seen his scouting reports and some of his highlights. Like, just dude was an athletic freak. That's what I thought he would be. I thought he was just going to come out there and fly all over the court, play really good defense, and make plays. Almost like I guess you could say, as a UConn fan, I'm reminded of Andre Jackson from their first national championship of the back-to-back. But his mid-range game was smooth. I was very, very intrigued and impressed by how he was like stopping on a dime, doing spin, pull-up jumpers. Like he's got a game. He's got an offensive game besides his athleticism, and that is going to work really, really well for an Arizona team that have made good players out of that. I mean, I personally don't think they let Keshad Johnson fully use his bag like that when he was there, but he had it in him. Pella Larson, Benedict Mathurin, like these are the kind of guys that Arizona has developed. These really big, athletic dudes with offensive games, and that's just terrifying, especially with the pace that they play at. And Arizona is a very, very scary watch for a lot of teams, I think, for what's going to be a long time this season. And it's because of Koa Peat, it's because of Jaden Bradley, it's because of Tommy Lloyd. But I am intrigued also to see how it stacks up when they get to the Big 12 and they face a Houston or a Kansas, when a team that could slow them down.
Yeah, and I mean, my last note on Peat in Arizona is you talk about just how skilled he looked in the mid-range and in the post. You see a lot of times, guys go for 30. Usually it's maybe they caught fire. They were hitting some tough shots. They were draining threes. They were making baskets that they won't be able to do consistently. There was nothing really I saw against, once again, Florida, some of the just stiffest competition that Peat will go against all year. There was nothing really I saw that I'm like, oh yeah, he's not going to be able to do that consistently. Like, oh, like he's just on fire. He's just having a night. And so I think that's kind of what is scary for the rest of the Big 12, just because of how easy he made it look against the Florida. And we'll see how it goes against the Houston and Kansas, but there aren't many teams above a Florida. Maybe Houston, at least defensively, right? But that might be it for the rest of the year.
Not worried about Florida, but certainly worried for Arizona's opponents going the long way. And I'm also worried about the Arkansas fans that are in our comment section as of late. Listen, I'm a big Dave Van Horn guy. I love college baseball. I got all the love for the Pigs on the baseball field. On the basketball court, different story. I am a noted John Calipari opponent, to put it lightly. But I will admit that the Hogs look pretty darn good in that opening win against Southern. Darius Acuff, 22 points, 4 assists, 2 boards on 8 of 13. Malik Thomas, 21 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. And Trevon Brazile. I have been so big on this dude since he was a freshman when Eric Musselman was the coach. He had 25 and 11. He looked all the part of the freshman that had all the potential in the world. Arkansas is a team that not a lot of people really, at least in my view, not a lot of people looked at them and thought, oh, okay, this is another Cal title contender. I mean, they're 26 in Ken Palm right now. I don't have the top 25 in front of me. I'm not sure where they're at in that, but like, it brought back some key players from a team that won 2 tournament games last year. Trevon Brazile was healthy, wasn't healthy. DJ Wagner coming back for another year is big, and I think that the way that the Hogs looked with this continuity and the talent that they have in there, they could be trouble in the SEC.
Yeah, I think they're definitely trouble. And to your point about the top 25 pool, they are 14th in the AP pool. And then of course this weekend
right.
play. Yeah. And this weekend play Michigan State, who is 24th, but they do have to go to the Breslin Center in East Lansing. So a true road game. You know, not an early season neutral site game, a true road game. So credit to Cal, credit to both programs because I believe this is a home and home. So you know, home and homes early in the year, great for college basketball. So credit to those programs for scheduling those. And I talked about Acuff because I'm a big Acuff guy. He's from Detroit. I think I first saw him play maybe the summer going into his sophomore year of high school, and he had a few maybe mid-major offers, wasn't ranked yet, and it was incredibly impressive. Being a Detroit kid, he reminded me a lot of a Michigan State Spartan and Cassius Winston at that time, just in the sense of the way he could control a game, and his pacing was so smooth. Exactly what you look for in a point guard, and lots of great freshmen this year in college basketball. There's 3 in particular that are getting majority of the national notoriety, and Darren Peterson, AJ DeMansa, and Cam Boozer. But I think Acuff could be the most valuable to his team in those sense because I think he will unlock a new level for Arkansas, and I'm really excited to see him play and a gym this Saturday where he won a state championship in. Where I'm sure he'll have a ton of family there, and it'll be his first chance against high major competition, and so that game is going to be a lot of fun. Arkansas fans were letting us have it because I think everybody picked Michigan State, and that was not at least I personally, with any of you guys, never discussed any of my picks. I don't think anyone shared ideas or information when making the picks. It's just how it came out. So I'm curious to see what you two think about that game.
For me, it's a lot of the individual matchups you're going to see out there, and the biggest one to me is Cohen Carr and Trevon Brazile. I mean, 2 guys are big, athletic, like very, very hard to control when they are going. And that matchup in particular, and there's a lot of good guards in this game, Fears and Acuff, but I feel like that's what it comes down to just because there's less depth down there. And I think this could be a game where Brazile is great, no doubt about it, but I think this is a game where losing a Visic might hurt Arkansas a little bit. And on the road in a very, very tough environment in Michigan State, this was a total toss-up to me, to all you Woo Pig Sueys out there. I was very, very 50-50 on who I was taking on this, but early season, like, I'm going to favor the home crowd on a toss-up like this. And coaching-wise, I think Izzo runs circles around Calipari, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah, I agree with Scott. I think, like we said, it's going to be a big test for Acuff and Malik Thomas too, another freshman for Arkansas. I think it's going to be a big test for them. First true road game of the season for them. Like Scott said, I'm just going to give kind of Michigan State the benefit of the doubt. I think the key matchup for me to watch is Jeremy Fears against Darius Acuff and even DJ Wagner. I think Fears is a really capable defender, and then we'll see. Because I'm just interested to see more how Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff will respond to that environment. Like I said, first true road test. That's the biggest thing for me, and I think it'll be a close one. But I think, like Scott said, I'll give Michigan State. I'm rolling with Michigan State just because road game in East Lansing, but I think it'd be really close.
And I worry about Arkansas. They don't, on paper, I don't think they have anyone to match up with Jackson Kohler, even though I don't think the offensive breakout has necessarily come for him yet, but it's not a guy you can leave alone. I think he's kind of almost like the joker in the deck a little bit. Like it's not the guy you'd expect to beat you, but certainly can.
Yeah, I think Kohler, not only in this Saturday's game, but this season for Michigan State, he's definitely going to be a guy that I don't want to say one individual will make or break a season, but they are kind of thin, at least when you look at the offensive scoring capabilities. And Kohler's a guy who his best aspect of his game is his offense in the sense of just how fundamentally sound he is in the post. So for Michigan State, not only to be successful on Saturday, but this year, period, he needs to be a guy who lives in, the double figure scoring range. Like he, realistically, if they want to come close to repeating the kind of success they had last year, and obviously I think the Big Ten is a little bit better up top than it was last year, but he needs to, average maybe 12, 13, 14 points a game and be a force in the post, make teams maybe think about doubling him at times, and when he does get double, make the right play and passing out of it. But that's definitely, like I agree with you, and he can be a total X factor in this game. And I'm curious to see if Michigan State can score with Arkansas, because Arkansas has, I think, more offensive firepower, but I think Michigan State has the edge defensively. So I'm curious to see how those two play out. And in terms of making my pick, I had a similar train of thought as you guys in siding with the home team. If this was at Arkansas, I would take Arkansas. If it was a neutral site, I think I would probably lean Arkansas. But I am trusting the home crowd, especially when we're 7 days into the season.
Right, I agree. I think
Brendon and Scott Sanduli agreement. I promise that does not happen very often, people, in a lot more than college basketball. But anyway, Ant, final word?
Right, I think like Preco said, I wrote down like if I were to look at these two rosters on paper, I think I would pick Arkansas just because of the firepower they have. But like we've said, like just early in the season, going with the home team, Michigan State. But Arkansas fans won't let us hear the end of it if Arkansas wins, so I think I got to go for Michigan State.
To give the Hogs and Coach Cal some credit, I mean, despite the underwhelming regular season last year, able to put it together to win 2 tournament games and end what was the best St. John's season in 30 years, and gave Texas Tech all they could handle in the Sweet 16, who gave Florida all they could handle in the Elite Eight, and Florida won the whole darn thing. So we're bringing back DJ Wagner and Trayvon Brazile. You added Darius a cuff. What's the limit here for this Arkansas team that we're seeing through? We've seen them for one game. We've seen what they might have, and they've got a tough non-conference schedule before the gauntlet of the SEC. They're at Michigan State, neutral floor for Duke, home for Louisville, neutral floor for Texas Tech, and neutral floor for Houston. So we're going to find out pretty quick what the Hogs are made of. So what's our estimation, we think, of what this team can do before they've faced some of these early season tests?
It's tough because there's two factors that are dragging them down a little bit for me, especially if we're talking about like what their potential is as a team, extending into March. I think this is a team that can make the Final Four. I think that is their limit. I see them relying heavily offensively on 2 freshmen. I don't know how well that goes, especially once you get to the Final Four. And then I don't know how much I trust Calipari. But in terms of at least this roster and how talented they are, I think they can hang with almost anybody in the country. You just mentioned their tournament success last year in a loaded region, making the Sweet 16. Like, that was a good run, all things considered. I wouldn't be surprised that they take that a game or 2 further. I also wouldn't be surprised if they lose in the round of 32. That's a Calipari team, especially when you have, maybe your 2 leading scorers when it all shakes out being freshmen.
Yep, and that's why I put down for me is I think this team goes as far as DJ Wagner and Trayvon Brazile make the jumps. I mean, these are 2 guys that have been here now multiple years, and they know what Cal's about, they know what the SEC's about, and the whole, freshmen have to become sophomores, and, they have to grow up when it comes to March. And as for a guy like Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, we don't have enough receipts on them to know if, can we expect that out of them as we get later in the year. But Trevon Brazile and DJ Wagner have been there, and these are two guys that have had all the potential in the world to be great, great players. In my opinion, both NBA lottery picks at the top of their games. So how they'll perform, I think, is the key to what Arkansas can expect out of their season. I think if they both play to the All-American level that I think they're possible of, I think Final Four is very, very attainable. And even more than that, I would not be surprised. Like, if Trevon Brazile and DJ Wagner jump into the players they could be, I would not be surprised if Arkansas was cutting down the nets in Indianapolis. Not at all.
Right. I think I went on the more conservative side. I said Elite Eight just because, I think when you get to that point, I think it just all depends on how, the bracket works out. I feel like sometimes when you get deep into the postseason, it's more like which side of the bracket are they on? Do they run into a juggernaut team like Purdue or like a Houston or like a Duke early on in the tournament? So I feel like I'm going to go more conservative, Elite Eight. But like you said, I think they do have the talent and the firepower definitely to make a Final Four, even a national championship run. Even like Preco said, which version of John Calipari are we getting? So I think it would just all depend on the bracket. I think it's just so early to say, but I'm on the more conservative side.
Yeah, and I haven't even mentioned Carter Knox in all of this. He didn't play in their opener, but he could be just as big of a tipping point as Brazile and Wagner, at least for me, alongside those freshmen. But I think it also, Ant brought up a good point there, I think this also will fall into Cal's hands a little bit here. And in terms of X's and O's, ever since you had probably the best offensive team in college basketball lose to Oakland in the first round of the NCAA tournament, I have almost no trust in John Calipari in making a team better, coaching-wise. So, I mean, he hasn't had a year where he simultaneously had a good offense and a good defense in, 3-4 years? I think it was the 22 team was their last, that lost to St. Peter's. That was pretty balanced at both. Jury's out on Calipari for me.
Yeah, he's lost any good faith he had built up, previously, and he has to earn that back. But I do think, like you mentioned, with the potential to cut down the nets, this is an incredibly talented team, regardless of who's coaching it. And I think that we're going to see how far that gets them.
Yes, we will, and we'll find out at least early on what we can maybe expect out of them. But so we're feeling pretty good about Arkansas. So comment section, quiet down. Okay, it's only November. Relax. But let's rile up another SEC fan base. Not that they're probably mad enough already that they almost lost to a SWAC team at home, and they don't have a football coach. The Auburn Tigers. That was highly concerning. Opening the Stephen Pearl era with a 95-90 overtime victory over Bethune-Cookman. Let's give it up for the Tigers. Keyshawn Hall looked great, UCF transfer, who was a bucket for the Golden Knights, and he was nothing different for the Tigers, 28 points. But Tahad Pettiford, just 11, their star returning freshman from last year, their only major returner from last year, and 4 of 13 from the field. And Auburn won in overtime. They shot 29 more free throws. Sirens wailing, guys.
One game in, and I don't want to toot my own horn. One game in, they could end up being totally fine. I think they're playing right now, and they're winning by a lot, which they're supposed to. I don't remember who they play, but another bye game. Of us four on the podcast, had them the lowest in the SEC. I think I had them 14th. I had them very low, lower than consensus. A lot of that was from the coaching change, but then too, I just overall typically am lower on Auburn than everyone else. Last year was an exception, but even going back to the Jabari Smith teams, I like Keyshawn Hall a lot, and he had 28. And Tahad Pettiford is good now. And I talked about it with Ant, but I don't know if he's ready to be the guy that he's going to need to be for them to have success. Last year he had a lot of pieces around him. He was able to, fit into this role really strong. So I'm lower on them. And now, just because I was lower, I didn't think they were about to lose a bye game to Bethune-Cookman. But I'm curious to see where you guys are on them now, because I was low going into the year.
I started out the season with them. I think it was 6th in the SEC, right below Arkansas, and right above Vanderbilt. And I mean, I'm ready to move them. I mean, just off that performance, they just kicked Merrimack's teeth in. Good for you, but like, I'm ready to. I think Vanderbilt looked better than them. Texas in defeat looked better than them. Like, I was very, very discouraged by Auburn, and I get it. You lost Janai Broome, you lost Dylan Cardwell, you lost Chad Baker-Mazar, you lost almost all the guys that made that 1 seed last year, that team, including the coach. But I thought they returned maybe not. It's not Janai Broome, but the straw that stirred the drink almost just as much into Todd Pettiford, and he was not impressive. I mean, cold shooting nights, they happen, but their defense looked very poor, and I thought the whistle helped them a little too much at some points. So how they're going to be able to build off of that kind of performance is like, it's very concerning. And with how the team, so much of that team from last year is gone, and there's no rest for the weary here. They got Houston in 10 days, and they got Oregon and Michigan, NC State, Arizona, and Purdue all on the non-conference schedule. And then you got the SEC. Like this, you can't be playing defense like you did against Bethune-Cookman and expect to win these games in a couple of weeks. Like, that was... I have nothing more than that. Auburn looked awful.
So right now, both of you, yes or no to Auburn making the NCAA tournament? And say what you were going into the season, too.
Pretty obvious, yes, going into it, just because you think... I loved the addition of Keyshawn Hall, and I thought Todd Pettiford could be the best guard in the country, and I figured that Stephen Pearl would just take the reins, and I don't know, like maybe I was thinking like 5 or 6 seed. I mean, would I be surprised if they missed the tournament, even with the notion of that performance? No. I would be surprised if they missed the tournament, yes, but it's a really tricky case. It's only been one game. Like, we are professionally overreacting here. Like, thank you to Mike Greenberg for getting that phrase stuck in my head. But one game like that, and that's what we have to work with. Like, not exactly slamming my stock down in Opelika, Alabama.
No, not at all. I think my biggest thing is, like you guys said, I'm concerned about Todd Pettiford just because, like Brendon said, like his elite pieces he had, Dylan Cardwell, Janai Broome, Chad Baker-Mazar, they're not there this year. Like, it's like a totally, like, he's only returning starter, I believe, from that Final Four team. And then tonight, had 13 points, once again was 4 for 13 from the field, just like he was the first game of the season. I don't know, just because when he's like a high volume scorer like that, he needs the right pieces around him, especially because he's not the most physically big player either. And then I also think too, Bruce Pearl isn't walking through that door. You know, Bruce Pearl is not going to save them. So I don't know. I just think we should, lower expectations when it comes to the Tigers, like we've said too already. Like you said, they got Houston coming up in a week, and it doesn't get any easier from here. I mean, even looking at their non-conference schedule, that 6-game gauntlet of Houston, Oregon, Michigan, NC State, Arizona, Purdue. I mean, like, I don't know. And then you got, like you said, Scott, you got SEC play after that. So it could not be a very good season for Auburn.
Certainly not off on the right foot, but the college basketball schedule makers have us on the right foot with a very tasty blue blood matchup on Friday night. A little less than 24 hours from the time of recording. Kansas and North Carolina. I am very excited to see this game, as it is two teams that look a lot different than they have in previous years. Kansas, there's no Hunter Dickinson, there's no DeJuan Harris. It is all the Darren Peterson show now. And North Carolina, no more R.J. Davis. But you don't know who you're turning the keys over to yet. Caleb Wilson's a 5-star, but is Seth Trimble going to take the jump? Is Henry Vasar the missing link? We don't know. These are two teams that look so much different than they have in previous years. And two coaches that, I mean, Bill Self, I don't know if he's necessarily lost a step, but he hasn't been on his game the last 2 years. And Hubert Davis, that dude just wakes up one day and decides, okay, I'll be a good coach today, and then the next he doesn't. So that two kind of Jekyll and Hydes a little bit. And they're going right at each other now in a marquee Friday night matchup. What are you guys looking for in this one?
First of all, I'm super excited to, one, have that blue blood matchup, but two, we have a duel between two 5-star freshmen in a blue blood matchup. Like, it's just great for the sport to get a taste. Darren Peterson, I saw a story earlier today of NBA players that were saying last year he would have been ready for the NBA. And then Caleb Wilson, another 5-star, less talked about one, especially when comparing it to Peterson. But to see them go head-to-head is going to be a fun storyline just in there. Both of their kind of first chance to really make a name for themselves in this college basketball world. But then, as far as Kansas goes, I'm very high on them this year. Like you mentioned, Scott, it's felt like Self has maybe lost a step just with these last few years being, down, at least for Kansas standards. But I'm really high on them this year, and part of that is because I think Darren Peterson has what it takes to lead them to a top 3 finish in the Big 12. And on the other end of the street, I'm low on Hubert Davis. I'm very curious to see what he does this year. I'm worried for his job security, especially if we get like an NC State finishes ahead of them in the ACC. This is a big chance for Hubert Davis to really, you beat Kansas, get going on the season on the right foot. This could be a huge momentum swing for him. So I'm looking for North Carolina and Hubert Davis to coach. Like, his job depends on it, because this season it might, and you want to get off on the right foot, and going into just starting the season with a marquee win over Kansas would be huge for him and the confidence for his group.
Yeah, and I mean, you go back the last couple of years too. I mean, like, Kansas had North Carolina's number. They beat them in Allen Fieldhouse last year in December, won the national championship over them in 2022. They haven't lost to North Carolina. I think it was 2003 when I looked this morning, and it's all coming down to these matchups and these coaches. Like, you got to put the history aside, no matter how much we want to look at it with these two-storied programs. And in a vacuum, Self is a better coach than Hubert Davis. I thought Darren Peterson played more impressively than Caleb Wilson in their debuts. And while Henry Vasar and Seth Trimble have it in them to be very, very good players, still need to see it. Seth Trimble in particular has been I don't want to say frustrating, but it's like, I see a lot of potential in the guy, and he's a senior now. Like, I think he could be very, very all ACC. And while he's able to do a lot of things that help you win, it's like, it's almost just as frustrating to see how he could hold teams back. And I think he ends up being the key in this game with Kansas, because you know what you're going to get from Peterson and Bidunga. Like, you would think that somehow maybe like that cancels out with Vasar and Wilson, although the height advantage is on the Tar Heels side there. So you're looking to see what Seth Trimble can do. I would love to see him guarding up against Darren Peterson to see what he could do defensively there, but also how their offense is going to run. North Carolina, for me, is a total unknown right now. I have no idea what to expect out of them, because you'd like to think they have the talent, but they had it the last 3 seasons, and only one of them did they not either. They had the 1 seed in 24. They missed the whole darn thing in 23, and they went to Dayton last year. They shouldn't have even gone to Dayton. So I think Kyan Evans has a chance to take this team a little higher, and Jared Stevenson too, but it's hard to go against the coaching experience and just like the season kind of polishedness of Kansas. I know it's at the Dean, but I'm big on Melvin Council personally, the St. Bonaventure transfer, and Trey White's another experienced guard. Kansas is older, been around the block a little more, lived up to expectations more often than not. I think with the kind of, I don't want to say underwhelming performance from Cam Boozer, but we don't like. How many years have we entered college basketball recently where people don't like, oh, yeah, he's the number one pick, like Cooper Flagg or Zion Williamson? I think Darren Peterson could have that kind of, yeah, I'm going number one next summer performance. And I think that's what we're going to see in a Jayhawks win for me personally.
Yeah, before Anthony jumps in and gives his thoughts, I want to 100% agree with you on your Seth Trimble take. I know you didn't quite want to label him as frustrating, but I wouldn't be mad if you did, just because you can see the capability there. He has the potential. He has the potential to be maybe the best player in the conference, and it's just kind of waiting for it to happen. And yeah, now he's a senior, so how long are we going to wait? And I also agree that I think Darren Peterson will take the number one pick. I think right now people are leaning AJ DeBansta, but I think by the end of this year, Peterson will have solidified his spot in that role.
Definitely. I agree. I think I'm more focused. A guy I like a lot for Carolina is the guy they brought in to help with Seth Trimble, Kylan Evans. I think he's a guy I'm really high on. Shot 45% from three last season at Colorado State. Had 15 points and 5 assists in UNC season opener. So I'm intrigued how Carolina's backcourt matches up, like you said, against Kansas, against Peterson. Also intrigued by how Kansas handles Carolina's bigs. Like you said, Scott, Carolina does have the size advantage. Vesar and Caleb Wilson. So that will be a bit of a tall task for Laberdunga, but I don't know. Like Scott, you said, like you guys have said, I think Darren Peterson's the best player on the floor tomorrow. And even though like it is at Carolina, I do think Kansas will pull it out.
There's that on there. That's going to be a really good. Yes, it's hard to call Kansas, North Carolina an appetizer, but I think we could have a 5-course meal with Alabama and St. John's this weekend. And personally, I think it's a very quick kind of dinner because I think I'm very sure on who's going to win that game, but I'm Big East biased, so you can kind of figure out a little bit where I'm leaning there. But we'll give the mic here to Brendon and Ant on this one. St. John's, Alabama in the Garden. In my opinion, the best game this weekend. What are we looking for here?
On a scale of 1 to 10, Scott, how high is the confidence meter? Sorry, Frigo.
No, go.
I'd probably go with a 9. I won't beat around the bush. I think St. John's going to win this game, and that's not even just my appreciation for Coach Pitino, but my thought on Alabama these last couple of years on Nate Oates is they play just their own style where it's not that defense is optional, but they're taking so many shots and running up and down the floor to where like defense can be optional if you're making your shots. Kind of for Alabama, and we've seen it the last 2 years. They have simply shot their way to a Final Four and an Elite Eight, and they ran into the two highest rated teams in KenPom in the 2 games they lost in those tournaments. But there's no Mark Sears now. There's no Grant Nelson, and while I think a LeBaron Philon could very well take the reins, and I was very impressed by Taylor Bull-Bowen in his opener the other night, and Aiden Sherrill I think is a very good player too. St. John's physically hurts people. They come out there like schoolyard bullies, and they will wear you down. There are teams like that in the SEC, but this is what happens every night in the Big East. They're literal rock fights. The last time Alabama played a Big East team, that was UConn. In the Final Four in 2024. They shot well above anyone could have expected. And they were in the game with like 10 minutes left in the second half. But they got tired. They were worn out. Why? Because these Big East teams, all of them, they have the same identity. Body blow after body blow. And that will bring your guard down and the knockout punch comes. I think it does not take long for that to happen to Alabama this weekend with how St. John's, they bring back Ejiofor. you bring in a stud when he's healthy, like Bryce Hopkins. I think Ian Jackson could really unlock this offense too if he finds his full potential. Joe Sandin's a microwave off the bench. And Dylan Mitchell, I forgot how much this dude impacts the game in so many ways. St. John's has guys all over the floor that can do absolutely everything. Alabama, Taylor Bowen, he played really good the other night. Zuby Ejiofor is a potential All-American. I think he was last year. And St. John's they bring back so much from last year, whereas Alabama does not. And St. John's identity last year was, we're going to punch you in the face. We're going to get down. We're going to foul you. We're going to get all up in your face. And that is not the way Alabama likes to play. And this game's in the Garden. Slick Rick against Nate Oates. I don't think this is close. I think the Red Storm blows out the Crimson Tide and makes a case for, I don't know if you can make them number one off of it, but, I mean, this St. John's team is better than last year's on paper. And this year's Alabama team is worse than the Alabama team from last year. You could look at it that simply. I just go deep into it because I'm a nerd. But I think the Red Storm is coming all over the Crimson Tide, and they're going back to Tuscaloosa with their tail between their legs.
I think St. John's is going to win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think you mentioned the style of play. I definitely think that's my main reason for leaving St. John's, especially what really, of course, we're playing at MSG, but the biggest factor in my mind, at least, was St. John's. They want to turn any game they play into a rock fight, and that's true on November 8th, and that is going to be true in March. That's their style of play. I think catching Alabama early, games in November are ugly no matter what, because guys, it's the first games. Guys are still getting used to their offense, still meshing, teams are still coming together. And so to run into St. John's early, where Alabama obviously is an exception with Nate Oates and their offense, but a lot of teams are going to play worse offensive games in November anyways. Oh, now you have to go against St. John's and try to put together a cohesive 40 minutes of competent offense. Just if you don't, St. John's is incredibly talented. You can't afford to fall behind too much or you're out of it. And so I think that's going to be the difference there. I do really like Phylon. He's not quite on the same caliber as Mark Sears, who was incredible. I'm super high on him, though. And then, like you mentioned with Bryce Hopkins on St. John's, I think that's not being talked about enough, and he's been dealing with injuries. But he has the capability. He has the capability to be Big East Player of the Year, maybe. First team all Big East, though. He has that capability. And Dylan Mitchell, like you mentioned as well, that's another guy who I've been extremely high on since he was in high school, and I think he brings another layer to this team. I think he's just a winner. I think he's a guy who incredibly athletic, can do kind of anything on a basketball court that he wants, and just makes winning plays. I'm excited to see St. John's this year. They're incredibly talented, and Rick Pitino is Rick Pitino.
I agree. I think it's just a matchup nightmare, honestly, for Alabama. I think, like we said, that was the one knack of these Nate Oates Alabama teams has always been when they run into their physical team. Like you Scott said, you run into a team with an elite defense. We know they can fly it up and down the court and score at a truly elite level, but even Preco said, every game in November is going to be ugly. So can they win that ugly, physical game? And which I think this will be. St. John's, that's the game they want to play. It's in the Garden, essentially a home game. So I just think St. John's is just tougher, more physical, and the Pitino factor. He doesn't lose in the Garden, so I think St. John's will win this one.
Thoroughly agree there. And we're going to move on to everyone's favorite mid-major, if you want to call it that, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, but our resident Zag, Evan Rodriguez, is MIA this evening, probably making a run up a mountain over there in Tempe. That was his favorite thing to do back in the day. But while he's getting his hike on, we're going to skip over to the sad section of the epitome of brutality, where no one has really fallen victim to yet, unless you're a horned frog down at Texas Christian University, as TCU lost at home to New Orleans in a bye game to start their year. I did not really know what to expect out of the Horned Frogs this year, but I've thought that they have been on a little bit of a downturn since the 2023 team with Mike Miles. And it looks... I don't know if this is rock bottom because they got a whole Big 12 slate left to go, and they did beat St. Francis tonight, but, like, you look at this roster, there's really nobody here that strikes fear into my heart, and losing at home to New Orleans like that, and Frogs have been hypnototed. We'll put it that way. And I always have respect for the way Jamie Dixon kind of ran his programs. Like the TCU and kind of the Jamie Dixon identity was they're going to play ugly basketball, but they're going to find a way. Like he's never really had great shooting teams. They've always been defense and crashing the glass, and that identity was not there the other night. It was not there last year, and I think this sums up to the fact that Jamie Dixon is not the coach that he once was, that was leading Pitt to the NCAA tournament. And I think this was a very fun program and a very scrappy team for a couple years, and it's sad that it looks like it is on its way out of the national radar, at least by my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it really got a feel for those TCU fans out there, too, just in the sense of when, going into this year, I think TCU was, pretty widely thought as a bubble potential team. It can swing either way. Now, taking a quad 4 loss game 1, that just is so much damage to your resume in literally game 1. It's just so demoralizing, because you can work your way up to that bubble picture again, but it's always going to follow you. So you got to feel for them there. I agree with you. Nobody on this roster scares you, especially, if you're in the Big 12, you're going from a Houston to a Kansas. Oh, okay, now we got a break at TCU. You just think of the talent spread out across those teams. And, yeah, it's just really the epitome of brutality for everybody down with that program. All those fans got to feel for them.
Right, I agree. I think, like Preco said, this is a very, very bad loss. Like, even because they're a team that I had, like, on my, like, when kind of making tiers of the Big 12, I kind of put them on that outset of the tournament, but still on that bubble tier, because I feel like the Big 12 is like a top 6-7 league, where then you can kind of start to see a separator in these teams. So I think that just definitely doesn't help them. That puts them out of the conversation as of right now. But I think in terms of the Big 12, like, I think there's going to be a real opportunity there for teams in that bottom half of the conference. You could have a team like Cincinnati, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, or even like maybe a team come out of nowhere like our Arizona State Sun Devils. It looked pretty good couple nights ago.
Job looked really, really freaking good. That was and Bobby Hurley even said after the post game, like it's a very low maintenance group, and there's been a lot of player egos that have gone through Tempe in previous years. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. They were picked last in the Big 12 preseason poll, although that happened to the football team last year, and we all know what happened there. So, but the Big 12, it's maybe America's most toughest conference every single year, and I think you look kind of at a far scope of it. You're going to see Houston. You're going to see Texas Tech. You're going to see Arizona, Iowa State, Kansas. This year you'll have BYU in there. But I feel it's a little bit more open in terms of the rest of the conference. I think, personally, Tunde Yesufu looked fantastic for Baylor the other night, and Scott Drew, but when you bring back literally nobody from last year, you don't know exactly what you're going to get. So it's a bit of a wait-and-see project on Baylor. I do think I would be surprised if they were not in the tournament. But Cincinnati with Wes Miller's job on the line, I think that's going to be interesting to see what they have this year. And you can't rule out Kansas State because sometimes Jerome Tang's teams are phenomenal and sometimes they're not. But whether or not they are, you got P.J. Haggerty in tow now. So I think those are kind of at least the bubble teams you're looking at with Cincinnati and Kansas State. And who knows? Someone could rise out of the ashes. Could be our Sun Devils. Could be the Utah Utes. Who knows? But that's a question for another time as we move on now to We're going to look ahead to some more games moving on to next week before our next Thursday podcast, where we should have all of us together. Before we get there, I believe it is Tuesday night, the Battle of the Bluegrass State, Kentucky and Louisville. And this is a really, really fun game for me, as it's two programs that, they're big names, but they're in new eras. This is year 2 under Mark Pope and year 2 under Pat Kelsey. And this is Kentucky is not living up to Kentucky expectations. They haven't been. Last year was their first trip to the second weekend. I think, 2019 was the last time, if I had that right. And for Louisville, obviously, it has not been the same since the vacated 2013 championship. But these teams are loaded with talent, especially at guard, and we're renewing a very great rivalry here in college basketball. And what are we looking for here, guys? Two teams that love to score the ball and might have some fans get into fights in the stands.
Always a great rivalry, like you said. Two programs that are in interesting places. I like Mark Pope a lot. I think it's that Kentucky job. We saw when they were in that cycle hiring a Calipari replacement, a lot of big names appeared. And Mark Pope, of course, with his Kentucky ties, but depending on who you asked, it felt like an underwhelming hire, when you're Kentucky. And I just like his style of coaching. I like how his teams play the game, especially offensively. And then to match up with the Pat Kelsey in Louisville, I am very high on Louisville this year. I really love the addition of Ryan Conwell. I think he can be a Big East guy. And ultimately, I have Louisville winning this game. I'm tempted to say I have Louisville winning the ACC, but it's tough with Duke. But them and Duke are my two top teams in the ACC. Love Pat Kelsey. I love what this roster looks like on paper. Obviously, haven't been tested yet to see it all together on the floor, but this is going to be the test, and I'm super excited to see both of these teams.
Yeah, and from what I saw from Kentucky in their opener, their defense looks vastly improved from last season and the year before. And that has not necessarily been the Cats' strong suit for a couple of years now. But Louisville's tempo looks terrifying. Those dudes run all up and down the floor, and they've got the guys to do it. You talked about Ryan Conwell. I'm big on Isaac McNeely, the Virginia transfer, phenomenal three-point shooter. And Mikael Brown looked the part of a five-star freshman. I think Louisville has him on the talent factor, and UK, I'm a little concerned about. Malachi Moreno, he's a good player, but without a true just shot blocker, get the hell out of my lane, and Jaden Quaintance, who's on the shelf for now, I think this could turn into a problem for Kentucky, where Louisville's they're just beating them down the court a bunch of the time. They get those fast break points, and I think it's going to open it up for Louisville down low. And with the experience that they bring in with Conwell and McNeely, Louisville might be back. And I think this is their statement that they are back with a win over Kentucky on Tuesday.
I agree. I'm going Louisville as well. I think, like we said, that the JQ injury is really tough for Kentucky. It's just hard for me to really gauge them right now. But I'm going Louisville, like you said. I think it's great to have this rivalry back. I love both head coaches, Mark Pope, Pat Kelsey. But yeah, I'm going Louisville, like you guys said.
Guys, we need to have original thoughts.
I know. I was like, we're sticking to this pick. It's not going to go well.
I'm sure we'll see the salty Kentucky fans get in the comments, to which I'll remind them that Dan Hurley said, "You're not good enough for me."
Wow.
Always and forever, go Huskies. But that's how we'll leave it tonight, because I'm losing my voice. And a lot of good games are coming up next week, but it should be coming after our Thursday episode. We'll try to get one in between there as well with some of the guys. But this has been another edition of On the Bubble. We're a long, long way away from knowing who's even on the bubble, but doesn't mean we're not going to enjoy one of the greatest sports on God's green earth. Enjoy your college basketball this weekend.